There is a level of dementia beyond that which is known to man. It exists in a realm devoid of all logic and reason. It is the middle ground between lies and lunacy. It exists only in a man which we call the Twilight Joe.
Thank you
Do
all.
you think inflation is a political liability?
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch. What people don't know is that 70% of the increase in inflation was a consequence of Putin's price hike because of the impact on oil prices. 70%.
Is what causes it. And if I were to read a lot of what you've said and written, I would leap to the conclusion that you think the primary cause of it is corporate greed, whether it's the oil companies, whether it's software companies, whether it's food processing companies. What causes inflation?
So I think the primary cause of this bout of price increases starts with COVID.
Everything you need to kick off Super Bowl weekend just got more expensive. Biden and House Democrats teamed up to create skyrocketing inflation. Guacamole up 100%, chicken wings up 26%, burgers up 17%. Joe Biden's inflation is intercepting your paycheck.
By the way, how many of you did really well with that $1.9 trillion tax cut that increased? Really in good shape, right? Really changed your, well, you did. Well, that's good. I'm glad to see you're doing well already. And I'm good. But guess what? If you elect me, you're not going to have your taxes are going to be raised, not cut, if you benefit from that.
If you want to get rid of inflation, the only way to do it is to undo a lot of the Trump tax cuts and raise rates. No Republican is ever going to do that. So the only way to get rid of inflation is through reconciliation.
Democrats who obviously paint themselves, they always have, as representing the little guy. But when you're talking about tax cuts, which Biden has said he's going to reverse all the Trump tax cuts, the wholesale number is just incredible. 65% of Americans receive tax cuts under Donald Trump. That means if you reverse that, 65% of Americans will receive a tax increase under Joe Biden. Does he really want to do that?
Well, I think he does because he wants to fund all kinds of very progressive left-wing programs like canceling everyone's student debt and the Green New Deal and other things.
But you know the money won't be there, Liz. You know that when they talk about tax increases, they have these big plans of all the money that's going to come in, but it doesn't because the wealthy people know how to move their money to a non-taxable position.
Well, that's right. And look, even things like he wants to tax gun owners. You think every gun owner makes over $400,000 a year?
Exactly.
I don't think so.
Exactly.
David, we know any big tax increase has to rely on most Americans and certainly middle income Americans. And that's what will happen here, too.
I think the IRS is going to target the highest income Americans. As the saying goes, that's where the money is. That's where they're going to look to collect. The idea that there's going to be this army of IRS agents descending on the average American is just preposterous.
Thanks, Green. Why do you guys keep saying the Inflation Reduction Act is reducing prices?
Because in the Inflation Reduction Act, when you look at Medicare, when you look at what it's going to be able to provide, allow Medicare to negotiate lowering cost for seniors, that is reducing costs. When you think about seniors who are paying, again, I just stated this, $2,000, $3,000 a month, and it's going to now cap that at $2,000 a year, that is lowering costs.
But a majority of Americans now say that price increases are causing them financial hardship that is more than at the start of the year. So where's the inflation reduction for everything else?
I got a bad feeling about this.
Mr. President, as you know, last Tuesday, the annual inflation rate came in at 8.3%. The stock market nosedived. People are shocked by their grocery bills. What can you do better and faster?
Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective. Inflation rate month to month was just an inch, hardly at all.
You're not arguing that 8.3 is good news.
No, I'm not saying it is good news, but it was 8.2 or 8.2 before. I mean, it's not. Maybe I can make it sound like all of a sudden, my God, it went to 8.6.
It's the highest inflation rate, Mr. President, in 40 years.
I got that, but guess what we are? We're in a position where, for the last several months, it hasn't spiked. It is just barely. It's been basically even.
This is fine.
We can also see that the housing market is beginning to cool, and we know that housing prices is part of the challenge for families, is part of our inflation challenge. We know that excess savings are starting to be spent. So we are starting to see signs that our red-hot economy is starting to cool. And so we know that because of that strength, we're better positioned than most other countries for the Fed to achieve its dual goals.
In the United States, our economy remains resilient, bolstered by President Biden's economic plan.
The president released oil from the strategic reserve. That contributed to almost 100-day of gas declines. I mentioned our work on the supply side, the Inflation Reduction Act, lowering medical care costs, lowering prescription drug costs, lowering the cost of clean energy. So all of these are moving in the right direction. They take time to factor into these price indices, and we'd like to see that happen a lot quicker.
Some people are concerned about the possibility of more than a slight recession. Is there the possibility that we're headed for more than a slight one?
Well, I wouldn't say it's inevitable that we're going to have a hard landing. I think it's possible we'll achieve it. So far, we've seen that, if you look at the job opening data, we're seeing the vacancies cool in a way that where just jobs are not posted, but they're not laying off workers yet. We got UI claims data today. Again, we're not seeing a pickup in layoffs. So I do believe there's a path. Obviously, it's a challenge. We are facing many shocks to our economy, global economies at the same time. But our economy is strong, it's resilient, and I do believe that there is a path.
That's stripping out food and energy. And Brian, just telling Americans that things aren't as bad here as they are around the world really isn't a reassuring statement at this point. And I want to ask you about the president's comments earlier this week to Jake Tapper, still saying that he doesn't believe that the U.S. will experience a recession, but if we do, it will be a, quote, mild one. What does that even mean? What should Americans be prepared for in the months ahead?
You have a president and administration that's waking up every day trying to address that problem head on, and we are making progress. We are making progress on energy prices. We are making progress. We just have to stay at it.
Just one more economic one. Are you concerned about the strength of the dollar right now?
I'm not concerned about the strength of the dollar. I'm concerned about the rest of the world. Does that make sense?
Can you explain that?
Yes, our economy is strong as hell.
The president said this week that the economy is both strong as hell, but also if there is a recession, it'll be very slight. What exactly is the forecast?
Well, look, forecasting is by its nature something that is a little bit uncertain. What we know is that...
That's political spin.